Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to give folks a few seconds here to join, and then we'll get started. If you're just joining us, we're just giving folks a few seconds here to join, and we'll get started in about a minute. Looks like that slowed down. So I'll go ahead and get us started while folks are still joining, since we've got a lot to cover and only an hour to do so. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on public meetings from Brown Act Basics to New Legislation. I'm Melissa Keene. I'm a senior program manager with the Institute for Local Government. I will be your host and moderator for this afternoon's webinar. So a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. Right now, we're just doing a welcome and some quick introductions. And then I'm going to turn it over to our partner, Alex, who's going to provide a presentation on what we just talked about in terms of the basics of the Brown Act to some of the new legislation that has just come through the state legislature this year. We do have a few minutes held at the end for some audience Q&A, and then we will wrap up and adjourn by 1 p.m. Couple of quick housekeeping items. As you joined today, you probably realized that you're muted, and you will be muted for the duration of today's webinar just because of the size of the audience. But that doesn't mean you can't ask us questions. So you should have a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or in your Zoom controls, wherever those may be. And feel free to drop questions into that Q&A box throughout the duration of today's webinar, and we will respond to them as we have time. And you also probably noticed that this webinar is being recorded. So we will be sharing the materials, some additional links to resources, and the recording of today's webinar shortly after we're done in the next few days. So really quickly before we jump in, I just want to share a high-level overview of ILG and how we might be able to help you in your local government efforts. So we're a statewide nonprofit that's affiliated with the League of California Cities, the California State Association of Counties, and the California Special Districts Association. So we provide practical and easy-to-use resources so that you all, as local agencies, can more effectively implement policies on the ground. We do that in a number of ways, through a lot of education and training like today's webinar, but also in conference sessions and in-person training and facilitated discussions. We also provide technical assistance, capacity building, and convening services for local agencies statewide. We have 4 program areas. In the interest of time, I won't dig into these too deeply, but you see them on the left-hand side of your screen. We do a lot around leadership and governance, which is where this webinar is attached to. But in addition to that, we also do work in civics education and workforce, public engagement, and sustainable and resilient communities. So if you aren't super familiar with us, definitely encourage you to go to our website, access some of the resources, and sign up for additional trainings as you're interested. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter for this afternoon, Aleks Giragosian, who's a senior counsel with Colantuono, Highsmith, and Whatley, who has been a longtime partner and friend of ILG. Aleks?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Happy to be here. My name is Aleks Giragosian. I work for the law firm of Colantuono, Highsmith, and Whatley. And I'm a city attorney. I'm also general counsel to a couple of special districts, so I wear some hats. And what all these agencies have in common is the Brown Act, which is what I'm presenting today. Before I get into the law, I just kind of wanted to touch on the history of the Brown Act. So prior to 1952, there were a lot of open meeting laws like the Brown Act. But the problem was that all these open meeting laws were for different agencies. So there's open meeting laws for cities, different open meeting laws for special districts, for counties, for school boards, and it was very confusing for the public. A lot of these laws also weren't being followed. These meetings were happening oftentimes in private. In 1952, a reporter, Michael Harris, which is pictured on the left over there, published a 10-part series in the San Francisco Chronicle titled Your Secret Government, which exposed how a lot of these decisions are being made in in the back, uh, in the back rooms. And then when they'd come out for open session, they would just vote on items and not discuss them. So the California League of Cities attorney at the time, Bud Carpenter, reached out to the individual on the right there, which is Mr. Ralph M. Brown, Senator Ralph M. Brown, and said, we need a new law. And this law needs to cover all local government agencies, and it needs to be simple and straightforward. And the senator was on board. So they reached out to the journalist, the guy who broke the story, and they said, we'd like you to write the preamble to this new law that we're going to call the Brown Act. And so this quoted language here is the preamble. It states, the people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. So I just think that's a cool story because the journalist that was in charge of, that was the one who drafted the article about violations of open meetings, was the one who got to write the intro to the Brown Act, which came about as a result of his work. Next slide. So the heart of the Brown Act is this: all meetings of the legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency except as provided in this chapter. It seems straightforward, but of course it's not. Next slide. What is a legislative body? It's the governing body of your local agency. So if you're a special district, it's going to be your board of directors, a city council, the county board of supervisors. It's also any commission, committee, board, or other body of a local agency, whether permanent or temporary, decision-making or advisory, that is created by the legislative body. So all the commissions of the city that are created by the city council are also legislative bodies. Any committees created by your special district are also going to be legislative bodies. One interesting point is, and because it's election season, I just want to raise it. When an official is elected to office, upon election, the Brown Act applies to them. So they're not subject to the Brown Act when they're a candidate, but as soon as they're elected, they're going to be subject to the Brown Act. Next slide. So one exception to this legislative body rule is the ad hoc committee. An ad hoc committee has to be four things in order to be a true ad hoc. Number one, it has to be advisory to the legislative body. It can't make decisions. Number two, it has to be for a limited time, so it's temporary. Number three, a limited purpose. And number four, it has to be composed of less than a quorum of the legislative body, right? So if your body is composed of 5 people, it has to be no more than 2. One note that I used to slip up on early in my practice is having other people be part of the ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee exception is limited to 2 elected officials, assuming you have a body of 5, right? So if you have a body of 5, you can only have those 2 council members, let's say, elected officials on the ad hoc. If you add a staff person to that committee, it is no longer an ad hoc committee. It's going to be subject to the Brown Act. So just keep that in mind. Only the elected officials can serve on the ad hoc committee. Another exception to the legislative body rule are these special advisory groups, right? So if an individual elected decides to bring in residents and say, I want all you guys to form a committee and to advise me, that's totally fine. They're not subject to the Brown Act. Staff is never subject to the Brown Act, so you don't have to worry about that either. You could have staff committees, and none of them are subject to the Brown Act. Next slide. What is a meeting? A meeting is any congregation of a majority of the members of a legislative body at the same place and time to hear, discuss, or deliberate upon any item that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body or the local agency to which it pertains. So we're going to explore that a little bit. Next slide. So the first type of uh, meeting you get in a non-traditional sense, because everyone knows of a meeting as, we all get together in one room. That one's pretty straightforward. The less straightforward one are these serial meetings. So a serial meeting is going to be any use of a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item or business that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So that first example, the hub and spoke, right? That's the one on the top. And just think of the hub as like the CEO of the organization. And all the individual green spokes there are the elected officials. And the chief executive officers speaking to all of the individual electeds. And that's usually totally fine. It becomes a hub and spoke violation when the hub begins sharing the information obtained from the other spokes to the spokes. So if a city council member, let's say I'm the hub in this case, and a city council member tells me something, I can't go tell another city council member what was told to me, right? Because then I'm acting as the hub. I could certainly provide all of them with briefing and talk about the same issue with all of them. I just can't share what the other told me to the others. Daisy chain is the one at the bottom, right? And that's A talks to B, B talks to C, C talks to D. That one's pretty straightforward. Next slide. So when talking about meetings, we mentioned serial briefings. Let me quickly mention emails. BCC is your best friend. Never send emails to elected officials using the CC or the to function in an email. You always want to BCC the email, right? Because the problem is if you don't BCC them and one of them presses reply all and responds, that elected official is replying all to everybody and is facilitating a meeting via email. So you have to be careful about emails. Now, I think 3 years ago, we have social media rules for the Brown Act too. These social media rules apply to, I'm just quoting, internet-based social media platforms. So these internet-based social media platforms are the traditional ones you often think about, Nextdoor, Instagram, Facebook, etc. The interesting thing about social media is this. Whereas for serial briefings or for traditional meetings or for emails, a meeting is triggered when you have a quorum of the body speaking with one another, right? So if it's a body of 5, if 3 are speaking to one another, then you have a meeting. So the social media isn't like that. If any two elected officials interact, that's going to be a meeting. So it's not about getting a quorum of them to talk to each other. If any of them interact via social media, you're going to have a violation. Next slide. And so just some thought experiments here. Obviously, I won't be calling on anyone, but just some thought experiments here to see, what is a meeting and what's a serial briefing. So the first one, when does the Brown Act violation first occur? 1, the planning director meets with Commissioner A to discuss her concern regarding agenda item 1. The planning director then meets with staff and city attorney to discuss Councilmember A's concerns. Then the planning director meets with Commissioner B to discuss Commissioner A's concerns. Then the planning director emails the entire commission regarding Commissioner A's concerns. And then the planning director meets with Commissioner C to discuss Commissioner A's concerns. When does the Brown Act violation first occur? So in this example, it occurs at stage 4, when the planning director emails the entire commission, because even though in number 3, we have the planning director sharing information. The planning director is acting as a hub, sharing information to two different members of the board. We only have 2 that have received information, but at stage 4, all of them have received information and they've received it via email. So that serial briefing happened, that serial meeting happened via email. Next slide. So again, when does the Brown Act violation first occur? Number 1, the planning director emails the agenda to the entire commission, placing the name in the to field of the email. Number 2, Commissioner A replies all and asks whether other commissioners saw the Laker game. Number 3, Commissioner B replies all and asks whether the commission can schedule a special meeting. 4, Commissioner C replies all and asks whether the chair can move an agenda item to the next meeting. And 5, Commissioner D replies all and presents her arguments in support of agenda item number 3. So when does the Brown Act violation first occur? Well, it's not number 1, right? Because even though adding everyone's name in the to field is just bad practice, it's not a violation. Staff can still communicate with all board members at the same time. So it's not number 1. The problem is when they reply all. So looking at number 2, you have a commissioner there, replies all, and talks about the Laker game, but you still don't have a violation, right? Because the Laker game is not within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency. So in this case, it's kind of okay that they pressed apply all because they're not talking about something relevant to the agency. Number 3, you have another reply all, and this time they're asking about when to schedule a special meeting. Now, maybe other attorneys might differ on this, but here's my opinion. You can never, in order not to violate the Brown Act, you need to have a meeting scheduled. And in order to have a meeting scheduled, you need to have figured out with the majority of the group when it's most convenient to meet with them. So I think it's totally fine for the board members to discuss among themselves or to discuss with the city management or special district management when they want to have a meeting. So I don't think number 3 is a violation, right? Because you need to figure out when to have a meeting in order to talk about stuff. Number 4 is when it first happens, because moving an item on the agenda is definitely within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency, and the commissioner pressed reply all, so facilitate an email meeting. Next slide. Social media. When does the Brown Act violation first occur? Number 1, Commissioner A posts happy birthday on Commissioner C's Facebook page. Number 2, Commissioner B likes Commissioner A's post. Number 3, Commissioner B tags all the commissioners in Commissioner A's post. Number 4, Commissioner C appreciates all the birthday love and likes an informative article that Commissioner B shared about a pair of handsome presenters who discussed the Brown Act. At the time I made that joke, I had a co-presenter. Number 5, Commissioner A comments on Commissioner B's article saying we should discuss this article at our next meeting. When does the Brown Act violation first occur? Well, it's not 1 through 3, right? Because 1 through 3, you do have commissioners interacting with each other, but they're interacting with each other about the happy birthday remark, which is not within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency. So that kind of interaction online is okay. Number 4 is the problem, and the problem is the informative article that pertains to the agency, which is the Brown Act article. So as soon as you have 2 commissioners, Commissioner C and Commissioner B, right, interacting with each other, then you have a violation under the social media rule. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. So you might ask yourself, can I post about city or agency business on social media? The answer is yes. But members of the board cannot use social media to discuss among themselves the business of a specific nature that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency, right? So back to that original rule. You can use social media to communicate with constituents, totally fine. The prohibition only exists between board members, not between you and your constituents. You cannot have one member post on discussions of other members. So no reposts, no comments, no likes, no emojis, no interactions with other elected officials on social media. Pretty straightforward rule. Next slide. So we discussed what a meeting is. Let's talk about some exceptions. And there are 6. You can engage individually with fellow elected officials, right? That's totally fine because it's less than a quorum. If, let's say, you have a body of 5, only 2 are interacting. Those are individual engagements, and that's totally fine. Attending conferences are also okay. Participating in community meetings organized by third parties are fine. Attending meetings of another legislative body are technically not a meeting of your body. Participating in social or ceremonial occasions. So let's say there's like an award for a staff or something. That's totally fine. Attending as an observer, I should say at a meeting of a standing committee. So sometimes local agencies create standing committees, right? Like a finance committee or some kind of other advisory committee. And that's totally fine. And those standing committees are going to be subject to the Brown Act. But what you don't want to do is have another elected official attend one of those standing committee meetings and participate. Here's why. Those standing committee meetings, assuming you have a body of 5, those standing committee meetings usually consist of 2 elected officials. Now, if you have a third one come, they can always just sit in the gallery and listen as an observer. But as soon as they make public comment, now you have 3 people. And when you have 3 people, that meeting is no longer a meeting of the standing committee, and it becomes a meeting of the entire body. And so you'd have to renotice it and everything. So if you are going to attend as an elected official a meeting of another standing committee, just make sure that you are only attending as an observer. No public comments, no questions, nothing like that. Next slide. So is it, I said city council meeting. Understand that anytime I refer to the city council or the city, this applies equally to districts and counties. Is this a meeting of a body? Example 1, a town hall organized and led by city staff intended to educate residents about a ballot measure. So this is something I encountered this week, for example. Town hall is organized by the city. Staff are on the panel and staff are the ones that are going to be giving the presentation, but you have a majority of the council members present at that town hall. Is it a meeting? The answer is yes, because at that town hall, the city council members are receiving information about the city, so it's within the subject matter jurisdiction, and that town hall is organized by the city. It's not organized by some nonprofit organization in the city, right? It's organized by the city itself. So that technically that town hall would be a meeting. Looking at that second example, a council member participates as a member of the public and provides public comment at a meeting of a standing committee of a city council, right? We already talked about that example. At standing committees, if you want to go participate as an elected and hear your other elected officials deliberate among themselves at the standing committee meeting, do not participate. This last example, all council members are part of a Facebook group open to all residents, and one of them makes a comment about wildlife in the group chat. Now, assuming that wildlife is within the subject matter jurisdiction, is that individual elected official's comment in the group chat a Brown Act violation? It's not, because no one else has interacted with that elected official. But if anyone likes their comment, if anyone comments to their comment, if anyone shares their comment, we have a problem. Next slide. Meeting location. Basically, the meeting has to take place within the jurisdictional boundary of your agency, except if any of these very specific exceptions apply. I won't go into all of them, but just know that meetings generally have to take place within your jurisdiction. Next slide. So there are different types of meetings with different requirements. You have your regular meeting, your special meeting, your emergency meeting. and then something called an adjourn meeting, which I won't go too deep into because it's not something that comes up very often among agencies. I'm just going to focus on the regular and special meetings, really. Regular meetings have a 72-hour notice period. Special meetings have a 24-hour notice period. That's the main difference between them. There are certain things you can do at a regular meeting that you cannot do at a special meeting. Uh, and at a regular meeting, you do have to have public comment on items not on the agenda, right? It's mandatory. But at a special meeting, you don't need to take public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Um, Emergency meetings can be, it's not really a special or regular. Emergency meetings, they happen, as soon as you need them. You take a vote to have an emergency meeting, and they're going to cover they should only cover those items that have triggered the emergency. Next slide. Okay, teleconferencing. ILG did solicit questions ahead of this webinar, and we received a ton of questions about teleconference meetings. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this. I think I have like 5 slides on it. So I break down teleconferencing into 4 types. There's the traditional teleconferencing, which was added in 1988 to the Brown Act. This is what you have done in the past, right? This is you notice it on the agenda where the teleconference location is going to be for that elected official who's going to teleconference in. Either they call in or they zoom in, up to them. And then they need to open up their space wherever they're at to members of the public who want to participate via teleconference as well. That's the traditional rule. And then we had COVID and everything broke down. So when the pandemic hit, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N-2920 in March of 2020, waiving and suspending certain requirements of the Brown Act specifically related to teleconferencing. Because no one at that time wanted to come in and physically to the agency's building. And the traditional teleconferencing rules allow for teleconferencing if you have a quorum of the body physically present at the agency's headquarters. Well, no one wanted to come in to be physically present at all. So in order to facilitate total remote meetings, they suspended the Brown Act via governor's order. And then the governor signed AB 361 in 2021, which basically codified his executive order. And now we can have totally remote meetings, but only when there's a declared state of emergency. And I'll go into more detail about each of these as well. Just cause teleconferencing came about in 2023, and emergency circumstances teleconferencing also came about in 2023. And I'll define what those two are in the next slide. Next. But before I do, just a quick note on emergency teleconferencing. You can have an emergency, you can have a teleconference meeting during a state of emergency. The state of emergency is determined by the state of California, not the local jurisdiction. So like whereas local agencies can declare emergencies, your local declaration won't matter. What matters is state declaration of an emergency. And if there is a state declaration, then you can meet to discuss whether meeting in person is going to have some kind of detrimental effect on public health or safety. If there is, then you can have a totally remote meeting. One note here is you'll have to, once you make that determination, you'll have to renew that determination every 45 days to keep the remote meeting status going. Next slide. So just cause versus emergency circumstance. These are the new ones. And just cause means some kind of childcare or caregiving need, a contagious illness, a need related to a physical or mental disability, or travel while on official agency business. Emergency circumstance, in contrast, means a physical or family medical emergency that prevents an elected official from attending in person. They are similar, but they have differences in application, and we'll talk about that next. Next slide. So in the next 3 slides, I've kind of broken these down into charts to compare them. The traditional is we have the traditional, the state of emergency, the just cause, and the emergency circumstances. Under traditional, you don't need to state a reason to take that meeting remotely. If you're an elected official and you're willing to have whatever location you're going to have that meeting from on the agenda, and you're willing to open it up to the public, you don't need to state a reason. You can just say, I'm going to take it remotely, so long as there's a quorum physically present, right? For the state of emergency, the reason needs to be the state of emergency and why there's a threat to public health or safety. For just cause, you need to have one of those just cause exceptions. For emergency circumstances, you need to state the emergency circumstance. In terms of a quorum physically present, that's that second row there. For the traditional rule, you need a quorum physically present in order for you to participate remotely. For the state of emergency, no quorum needed. Everyone can be remote. Just cause, you still need a quorum physically present. Emergency circumstances, you need a quorum physically present. Looking at that third row now, methods of members' participation in a teleconference meeting. Under the traditional method, you can call in on your phone. It can be via Zoom. Both are okay. The state of emergency, same deal. You can have a teleconferenced one that's just phone calls. You can have audio visual. Both are fine. But for just cause and emergency circumstances, it needs to be audio visual, something like a Zoom or a Skype. You cannot do a simple phone call. That won't work for those two. Looking at that fourth line, required opportunities for public participation. Under the traditional rule, the elected can participate remotely, right? But we don't need to offer that same opportunity to members of the public. Not necessary. Under the state of emergency teleconference exception, you do. You need to provide that opportunity to them for members of the public to participate remotely. But they don't need to be in person, right? Because no one's going to be in person during the state of emergency. For just cause and emergency circumstances, you need to provide both the option for people to participate in person and to give their public comment in person, and for them to give their public comment via Zoom or whatever method you've chosen. Next slide. So the agency, the governing body, does not need to approve the reason why you're going to take a teleconference call under the traditional method. You could just do it. You don't need to ask for permission. Under the state of emergency, the body has to approve the reason, right? Because you all have to collectively decide it's not safe to meet in person. Under just cause, you're sick, childcare need, you have some kind of physical disability. You don't really need to, you just need to say, I have a just cause, explain what the just cause is, but the entire body doesn't need to approve it. But for the emergency condition circumstance one, the body does need to approve it. It needs to be approved by the relevant board. Looking at that second row, votes must be taken by roll call. Yes, for all of them. Anytime you're doing teleconference meetings, you need to have roll call votes. The difference between a voice vote and a roll call vote is a voice vote is, can I have the A's and everyone says aye or nay? That's a voice vote. Roll call is you read the names one by one. Director X, Director Z, Director Y. And each one says yay or nay. Looking at that third row there, teleconference location included on agenda. Under the traditional rule, you had to list your location. But it's kind of awkward, right? Because let's say you're sick, but you still want to participate in the meeting, and you're going to take that call from home. You'd list your home, and then your home address is going to be on the agenda. And you have to open it, and you have to open up your home now to the public, but you're sick. You don't really want members of the public there, right? So the traditional method might not be the best method. The traditional method is better suited for, like, let's say travel. It's not great for illness, other kind of physical or mental limitations. State of emergency, you don't need to list where everyone's meeting from. Just cause, you also don't need to list, right? Like under the just cause exception, if you're sick, you just say, I'm sick. I need to have this meeting from my house. And you don't need to list your house and no one comes to your house. Emergency condition, same thing. You don't need to list your location. That fourth row, required course of action if disruption prevents broadcast of a meeting. If for whatever reason I'm an elected official, I'm taking a call from my house. Under the traditional rule, if my call drops, meeting continues. Totally fine. Under the state of emergency, if there's some kind of Zoom issue happening, you have to halt the meeting. You take a recess. Same thing for just cause and emergency circumstances. If there's something that causes the Zoom meeting to get disrupted, you have to stop the meeting because members of the public then won't have an opportunity to hear you or participate. Next slide. Okay, here's the new rule. The governor just signed AB 2302, which is the line at the bottom, and I'm just going to explain the difference here. Can't use it more than 2 meetings per year. And for both of them together, you can't use it for more than 3 consecutive months or 20% of the regular meetings or 2 meetings per year if the body meets less than 10 times per year. Like here was the problem. What if the body meets more than once on a single day, which some agencies do? That causes problems because then we're counting 2 meetings in a single day. Sometimes because you have a percentage there, 20%, you're going to have a fraction. And what do you do with it when you have a fraction? Do you round up or you round down? It gets confusing. So the legislator did in adopting AB 2302, that was signed, I think 5 days ago, is they have a clear bright line rule now. You still only get 2 just cause meetings per calendar year. But when you have just cause and emergency circumstances together, you can only have 2 if your body meets once per month, 5 if your body meets twice per month, or 7 if your body meets 3 or more times per month. So that's the new teleconferencing rule. Can we go to the next slide? Sorry, I don't know if you guys heard me. There we go.
I think it's my
how's my
internet.
audio, by the way, Melissa?
I think my internet is freezing a little bit, so I will try to transition that, but keep going.
Okay. It may have been mine too. Apologies for that. And then feel free to cut me off and let me know if internet freezes. Okay, so contents of agenda. The agenda must have an item for public comment for items on the agenda as well as items not on the agenda. For each item, you should have a brief general description of what each item is. It should state the time and location of the meeting, how to request disability-related modifications or accommodations, information regarding remote participation to the extent someone's going to participate remotely, and CEQA information when necessary. And the CEQA information would be whether the project is exempt or you're going to do an EIR or whatever the case may be. Next slide. In the interest of time, let's skip this one. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so never discuss items not on the agenda except when there's an emergency and you're going to need a majority vote of the body to declare that there's an emergency and you need to put something on the agenda. When immediate action is required and the need arose after posting the agenda. So like let's say a grant opportunity came to your attention after the agenda was posted, but you won't have enough time between this meeting and the next meeting to get the board to approve the grant application. So you can place it on the agenda, but you're going to need 2/3 approval of the body, which is, if the body of five, you're going to need four of them. And if there's only four present, you're going to need unanimous approval. Uh, you can also talk about items that were properly posted to an agenda not more than 5 days ago when the item was continued. This has to do with adjourned meetings. I won't get into that detail. And the last one is you can always consider a request from a member to participate in a remote meeting or to participate remotely due to an emergency circumstance. And that relates back to the teleconferencing rules we talked about. Next slide. Okay, right to public comment. Speakers should not be interrupted unless speech is not protected by the First Amendment. Right, so that's your threats, your incitements of violence, extreme obscenity. So just here's some examples and to think through. When should we cut the individual off as the chair of the meeting? When he gets loud? No, you don't cut people off when they get loud. When the mayor feels insulted? What if they actually said an insult? You're the worst elected official of all time. You still can't cut people off for that. When they give a silent Nazi salute, this was a real case. Someone stood in the back of a meeting, gave a silent Nazi salute. They were kicked out of the room. They sued and they won because it was determined that while their actions were offensive, those actions didn't disrupt the meeting. The next one, when he shows up in a KKK costume, another real thing that happened. Someone showed up with a KKK costume. It was offensive. They were kicked out of the meeting. They sued and they won because again, the court determined that that person was what they were exercising their First Amendment right to be a jerk, but they weren't disrupting the meeting, and so they shouldn't have been kicked out. When the person uses profanity, so profanity isn't actually prohibited under the First Amendment, but you can cut people off when the profanity is such that there's no substance anymore to what they're saying. So if it's a criticism of the board and they're going off on the board and they throw in a couple of swear words, uh, that's not prohibited. But if it's just a series of F words, you can cut them off for that one because there's no substance there. When their time limit is up, can you cut them off? Absolutely. You definitely cut them off then. When they cause a disruption at the meeting, you can definitely cut them off. Next slide. So a couple of do's and don'ts regarding public comment. Do adopt reasonable regulations, including time limits. Do provide twice the allotted time to those requiring a translator. Do not require speakers to provide their name or address before public comment. You can request that they do, but you can't mandate that they give you their address and name in order to give their public comment. They can give their public comment anonymously if they choose. Do not adopt a time limit less than 2 minutes. Sometimes you can give more time, sometimes you can give less time, but it should never be less than 2 minutes. And there's a case on point for that. Do not discuss the public comment with the body or the public commenter. So on this point here, if there's a public comment and you really want to address it, I think there's only like 4 things really that are appropriate. You could have a short, quick response, like a 1-sentence response to that public commenter, but you don't want to have a discussion, right? You can ask them a clarifying question. You can refer the matter to staff. That's also appropriate. Or you can refer it to you can ask to agendize it for a future agenda, what they brought up. I think those are the only 4 appropriate responses. The rest of them, you should avoid having a back and forth or any kind of discussion with the public comments or be because that public comment is not going to be on the agenda, most likely. And even if it is on the agenda, you don't want to have a discussion with members of the public because they're not the decision makers. You, as the elected officials. Next slide. Uh, so here's another new law, new as of I think last year. Under the existing law, the chair of the meeting is authorized to remove an individual disrupting the meeting. Individual must be provided a warning beforehand. So what you do is generally you adopt like a code of ethics. And when someone's being rude, you interrupt them and you remind them about the code of ethics. And if they continue violating that code of ethics, you interrupt them again. You say, "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to have to cut you off if you continue to violate our code of ethics." And if they continue, then you can ask for that individual to be removed. Uh, but before, we didn't have a definition of what disruptive conduct was. Now we do under SB 1100. And it's failing to comply with reasonable and lawful regulations adopted by the legislative body related to public comment or any other law, uh, and engaging in behavior that constitutes the use of force or a true threat of force, right? I should say or. It's those two that can constitute disruptive behavior. Next slide. Okay, coming to the end here, closed sessions. All public meetings, all public business has to happen in open session unless one of the closed session exceptions apply. There are many closed session exceptions. I believe this is the exhaustive list. And at the bottom there, you can see it says threat to public services or facilities. So here's a new law that was also signed, I think, like 5 days ago by the governor. It's AB 2715. And that basically expands that closed session exception for threats to public services or facilities to include threats to critical infrastructure controls or critical infrastructure information. So I guess the real life example that brought this new law about was that I guess in San Bernardino County, the sheriffs there had to pay $1.1 million in ransom in cryptocurrency to retain control of their computer system because they got hacked. And the board was trying to figure out how do we meet in closed session to discuss this ransom that we have to pay about this cybersecurity infrastructural issue. And so the legislator responded by allowing all agencies to meet in closed session, again, regarding threats to critical infrastructure controls or critical infrastructure information under AB 2715. Next slide. Closed session do's and don'ts. Do agendize the reason for closed session. Don't allow anyone other than the legislative body and necessary staff to enter the closed session. Don't go into closed session without legal counsel because it can get tricky. People get off topic sometimes. Don't disclose closed session confidences. On this point, information you learn in closed session can never be disclosed by you as an individual, but the legislative body can vote by majority vote to disclose what they learn in closed session. So if they got some information in closed session and you want to let the public know, the legislative body has to come out of closed session, or sorry, in closed session, they can vote. And then that vote will be reported on out of closed session, and then they can disclose to the public. But without that vote, individuals can't disclose. The last point is don't discuss items not specifically agendized. So for example, if you've agendized a discussion or a performance evaluation for your general manager, do not then begin talking about their contract because that's a separate closed session. That's labor negotiations. If you want to talk about both, make sure both are agendized. You have to make sure you're only talking about the thing that's agendized for closed session. Next slide. So just a quick question about closed session to think through this problem. It says the city council called a closed session to negotiate a settlement agreement to resolve a lawsuit. Who shouldn't be in a closed session? City attorney, the city manager, opposing party's attorney, a council member opposed to the settlement agreement. a miniature horse slash service animal of the council member opposed to the settlement agreement. So looking at 1 and 2, city attorney and city manager should probably be in there. Those are staff people that should be in there. Opposing party's attorney should probably not be in there, right? Because you want to have only the board and relevant staff people there. The opposing party's attorney is the one you're going to talk about, so you don't want them in the room. The council member opposed to the settlement agreement is still a council member and has a right to be in the closed session with the rest of them, even if maybe that council member doesn't agree with the other 4. And the miniature horse is a service animal, and service animals are always allowed. Next slide. So violation of the Brown Act. This is my last slide here. What happens? Luckily, the Brown Act, when it's violated, the consequences at the beginning aren't as severe because there's an administrative procedure that you can undertake to remedy the problem. So if there's a violation, someone can't just sue you. It's not like the Public Records Act where there's a violation, you get sued, or the Political Reform Act. If there's a violation of the Brown Act, first they have to send you a cease and desist letter. And that letter has to be sent within 30 days if the violation deals with an agenda issue or a noticing issue, or 90 days if it deals with some other Brown Act issue. Then the agency has 30 days to cure that alleged violation. And only if the agency chooses not to cure the violation does the individual have a right to sue within 15 days after the expiration of that 30 days or notice of whatever the agency is going to do, right? So it's nice because there's an administrative process. And oftentimes, like we receive these letters a couple of times, every time we get the letter, we see what we try to understand what they want us to do, like they wanted extra notice or whatever. Oftentimes we don't argue with them. We just re-notice that meeting. Or if they feel like we talked about something that wasn't on the agenda, totally fine. We just agendize that for the next meeting, and the council or board of directors, the board of supervisors can just vote on that item again. They could just do another vote at the next meeting, and everything is kosher then. What happens when the court determines a Brown Act violation occurred? The action that was in violation may be nullified. The city will likely pay plaintiff's attorney's fees. There may be civil penalties in terms of court fines. And worst case scenario, you might get criminal penalties in the form of a misdemeanor. And that's only if it's intentional. And I don't ever recall ever seeing criminal penalties issued for the Brown Act violations, but just know it's a possibility. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I turn it back to you, Melissa.
Thanks, Alex. There's a lot of content to cover in a short amount of time. And so we do want to make sure we have time for a couple of questions here. And so I'll go through some of the ones that we received ahead of time and that have been continuing to come in during today's presentation. First, we've seen a couple of questions come in about the opinion that the Attorney General issued around events and city council members or board of supervisors attending city-sponsored events. So can you speak a little bit to that opinion? And we will also share a link to that in the follow-up email.
Right. So I think what's being discussed is there was an Attorney General opinion about I think it was a State of the City speech, where the mayor was giving a speech about the state of the city, and all the other council members attended, and it was determined that that was a meeting. That situation is akin to what I talked about in the town hall example. When it's city organized and you have a quorum of people in attendance, it's going to be a Brown Act meeting. So that's the first point. There was another AG opinion that came out recently about a reasonable accommodation for an elected official who I think there was some kind of physical disability, wasn't able to attend and requested to have the meetings participate, I think via Zoom or something. And the AG determined that under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Brown Act, the body had to accommodate that individual by allowing that remote participation. Now, you still have that remote participation opportunity available under the Brown Act, right? Under the teleconferencing rules for just cause. Um, but it's interesting because the AG weighed in and said, yeah, and that also exists, regardless of the Brown Act, it also exists under the ADA. The most interesting thing about that AG opinion is what it doesn't say. That AG opinion was about allowing elected officials to participate remotely under the ADA. It's unclear whether a member of the public that wishes to participate remotely because of some physical limitation, whether that same ADA rule applies to members of the public where we have to make some kind of accommodation for them.
Great, thank you so much. And as I mentioned, we will share a link to that opinion with you all, as well as some of the other legislation that has been mentioned throughout today's webinar, so you can refer back to it. You ended your response on a note that is related to a couple of other questions that we've received, and so I just want to get some clarity there. Are there any legal requirements that public agencies, local agencies have to have an online platform to allow for public participation now that we're back in person and all of that?
Thanks. Yeah. So there are technically no legal requirements, right, for agencies to meet remotely. Here are the only exceptions to that rule. Number one is that ADA Attorney General opinion, where a member of the board needed to meet remotely in order to participate. So you need to make an accommodation for them, right? So there's the ADA limitation. There's also under the Brown Act, when a member of the board requests to meet remotely under the traditional rule or the just cause rule or the emergency circumstances rule, if the agency has the resources to accommodate that request, it should. If it doesn't have the resources to accommodate that request, it doesn't need to. And you can just tell that elected official, we don't have the resources, we don't have the Zoom capabilities in the physical space to accommodate your request. But if it does, then it would need to.
So a little bit of a case by case based on the agency's ability to accommodate.
Right.
We did get a few questions asking for clarification going back to early in your presentation, you were discussing ad hoc committees. Could you just clarify that a little bit more? I think there was some confusion around the component around the staff participation. So could you just give a little bit of an overview again about when the Brown Act would come into play with ad hoc committees?
Sure. So the Brown Act states that ad hoc committees, in order to be a true ad hoc, not subject to the Brown Act, it needs to be limited to less than a quorum of the body. So that means it's going to be limited to the elected officials, and it's going to be limited to a less than a quorum. So in most cases, it's two, right? Because most elected bodies are 5 people. Now, when you add a staff person to that, we have a problem because it's not a true ad hoc in the sense contemplated under the Brown Act, because the Brown Act only contemplates electeds being in the ad hoc, not non-electeds. So what you can do is you can have staff people advising the ad hoc. That's totally fine, which is most often the case. Just know that when the ad hoc needs to deliberate and make a determination, provide some kind of recommendation, it should only be the electeds that are voting to make that determination, right? Staff people, members of the public, none of them should be voting alongside that ad hoc. Otherwise, you're violating that ad hoc rule under the Brown Act.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, they can be a participant in the meeting, give a presentation, et cetera, as long as they're not involved in the actual voting or decision making or recommendation process to the full governing body.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Unfortunately, we are at time, and as I'm sure everybody on the line knows, we have a ton more questions that we weren't able to get to. So let me just provide a couple of additional things for you all here before we leave. First, definitely connect with us, share your questions, share your thoughts, sign up for our newsletters, things of that nature. This is how you can connect with us at ILG. And then a quick reminder, we will be sharing the recording of today's presentation, the materials, and as I mentioned, links to a number of other resources for you all, as well as the legislation that we discussed in the next few days. And I will put our emails up here in case you need to follow up with us, since we didn't have a ton of time for questions this afternoon. If we didn't get to your question, we will try to address as many as we can in that follow-up email with resources, but also feel free to reach out to me if you have a question that we did not get to. I want to thank everybody on the line for sharing your lunch hour with us, and thank you, Aleks, for sharing your experience and expertise with our attendees on the line. And I want to turn it over to you for any final thoughts or anything you want to share with our attendees before we leave them today.
Well, that's all. Thank you very much, Melissa and ILG team, for the opportunity.
All right, thank you all, and have a great afternoon.